Welcome to episode 38 of 10-Minute Record Reviews. And today I'm going to talk about Sam Cooke's album from 1964, his last album, Ain't That Good News. If you're thinking about Sam Cooke's career, as I have been, there are really three major developments that happened between his sort of rise to prominence in the 1950s and then his maturation as an artist until his untimely death in 1964. And one of those is the arc from being a gospel singer and being sort of pigeonholed there to moving into pop music and getting much broader appeal, but then having the gospel piece work back into his music. The second arc is him gradually taking control of the business side of his career. He has struggles with label owners from an early age. He's never a passive artist on a label. He moves to Keen Records, but then eventually strikes up creates his own label. He was the first black artist to create his own label, SAR Records, and in order to be able to, obviously, to control his own artistic destiny, but also to make sure he wasn't getting ripped off. He brings in Alan Klein, and he was in fact Alan Klein's first major client. Klein, of course, became even more famous subsequently for managing the Beatles and the Stones, and then infamous for apparently basically fiddling the books. The third arc is from being essentially just a singer, right, to being a really significant person in the civil rights movement, and not just because of some of the songs he sang, and of course the great anthem, Change Is Going to Come, on this album, but arguably more importantly because of the bravery of the personal stands that he took in the face of discrimination, segregation, threats, and so on. And there's numerous occasions where he refuses to play to segregated audiences. Either the promoters then allow the audience to be both a black and white audience, or they refuse and he cancels the gig, and as a consequence, shortly thereafter, those venues end up desegregating themselves in the early 60s. And this was not cost-free for him. It was risky. These were not neutral situations in which he was asserting himself, but he did so very courageously and attracted the attention and the mutual respect, I guess, of people like Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and other key sort of political, cultural leaders of the time. Yeah, so it starts with, there are 5 singles, by the way, off this record. It was an absolute monster. Although, funnily enough, the most famous song is not actually the most, by any stretch, the most successful single. It starts off with "Ain't That Good News," which is it was just a wonderful piece of writing. It's got a great verse at the climax of the song about disconnecting his telephone. It's lots of kind of PG kind of allusions here. I think, and this song also is he's tapping into his gospel past. This is the repurposing of a spiritual tune and substituting a more earthy lyric, same title, but a much more secular lyric. He then follows up. Second song on the album is "Meet Me at Mary's Place," where he brings his old group, the Soul Stirrers, where the group within which he had first risen to fame, back in the picture. They provide fantastic backup singing on this particular track, and it's a really kind of upbeat. There are a few singers, I think, that can convey joy as well as Cooke does, and he proves that again on the next track, which is of course the famous track "Good Times," covered by so many people. It was covered by Aretha, by the Stones. I always think that song is the best ever song. It's just about sort of living in the moment and that sort of devil may care party feeling. Then we're on to a song he co-wrote with a few other folks called "Rome Wasn't Built in a Day," which is a kind of a cute love song about being patient and letting love grow. Then 2 other songs, "Another Saturday Night." He does a tour in 1962 of the UK, along with, amongst others, Little Richard and Gene Vincent. And they're booked into various hotels. In one of these hotels, there are no female visitors allowed in rooms occupied by male guests after a certain period of time. and the lyrics here are basically a reflection of him sitting at home in his hotel room after the gig, having money in his pocket, but basically no one to spend it on, and not much to do. It being England, where the pubs are all shut at 10 p.m. The final song on side one, another single which was a great hit, and is the Tennessee Waltz, which of course is a standard, not a Cooke written song. This is a much more upbeat version of this than, I think it's double time certainly than the original and the traditional song. This was a B-side, but it charted up to number 35. Then we're on to side two, and side two kicks off with what is, without question, the centerpiece of the album, and a single which was released, although not a very successful single actually, Change Is Gonna Come. This is a song which has since found its way to the hearts of all kinds of folks, and it has become if not the anthem for the civil rights movement. Now, the story goes about this song that Sam Cooke was very inspired by Dylan's recording of "Blowing in the Wind," and was amazed it was actually written by a white guy, that it was not actually directly written about the civil rights movement. Wanted to write a song like this. This song comes to him in a dream. He gets up, he writes it down. A lot of the, if you read about the song, people always reference it's connecting to "Blowing in the Wind." But it's been pointed out there's another lineage for the song which makes a lot more sense, or certainly is much more resonant when you actually listen to the song musically. And that's with Old Man River, which of course is a Kern and Hammerstein song, which was written for Showboat for Paul Robeson to sing on the stage, and obviously in film adaptations. And this song not only has the same spiritual feel as Old Man River, but it also directly riffs on the lyrics from Old Man River, around living and dying. And the themes are also really very, very similar. It was released as a B-side, and it did chart, but it barely made a ripple in the charts, and basically disappeared from view. He also almost never performed this live before his death. One exception being on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Sadly, those tapes have been lost, which is some kind of historical crime to have lost those. In any event, it was not a song which he did much to promote or made much impact at the time. Since then, of course, it's become a monster. It was played at Malcolm X's funeral. It was played at when it was played when Martin Luther King was killed, and it was played at Barack Obama's inauguration. It's that punctuation mark to the moments of civil rights, whether they be forward or backwards. And then the rest of the album, I think, is just okay. There's 5 more songs. None of them are written by Cooke. They're all standards. He does a really good job singing these songs. They're heavily orchestrated, unlike a lot of the rest of the album. So there's a real shift in sort of the feel of these songs. And it just does kind of feel like producer-inspired filler. So there's Falling in Love, which was written by the guy who had previously arranged You Send Me, which had been a big hit. Then there are a number of songs, basically Tin Pan Alley songs or Irving Berlin songs. There's a traditional Appalachian sort of hillbilly song which closes out the album. For me, it's the first side and then the first track on side one, and then I'll let the record spin. But that's really not why you're gonna buy or listen to this record. This is a wonderful album. I give it 4 out of 5. If it had continued the way it did for the first 6 or 7 songs all the way through the album, this is a flawless piece of music. But unfortunately, as I just mentioned, it runs out of gas. It's 60% of a perfect album with a kind of a dose of schmaltz towards the end. You can, as you stand back and you look at it, and certainly the first part, you can see where he's going. You can see that the schmaltz would disappear, where his career to continue. You just wonder where this guy who was already a giant in the civil rights movement was going to end up, if, had he lived into the late 60s and early 70s, and what happened with African-American music and the kind of contribution that he might have made. All we can do is wonder. But it's still a wonderful album, and I encourage you to listen to it.